Meghan Markle has just given a bizarre new interview in Australia, trying to justify that trip and also receive international acclaim for her new moves in the fashion arena. But for me, this was totally bizarre. Australian Women's Weekly is where she's given the interview. Now,
I think the whole Australia visit was a bit of a poke at the king. I mean, you remember the king is the king of Australia, and William is the heir to the throne of Australia. So the whole thing, I think, was call me Meg. Well, sorry, Meghan Markle, Duchess, whatever. Meg is a very Aussie way of saying something. Same as Hazza and Meg. You'll always be a loved member of our family, but you're no longer a working royal. That's it, you're out. Don't trade on the name and don't try to monetize the name. That was the clear message from Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
He's such a pussy.
Meghan Markle has now confirmed, in her own words, on the public record, that she is monetizing the outfits she wore on the Australian tour through a commercial partnership with the one-off fashion marketplace platform. The confirmation comes through an exclusive interview with Australian Women's Weekly, conducted by the magazine's editor and published as Meghan's flagship Australian tour follow-up communication. The relevant passage reads as Meghan's direct quotation. Over the last several years, she would hear about an incorrect designer getting credit for something she wore, and that never seemed fair. To that end, she has partnered with One-Off to ensure the correct designer is credited. The structural significance of this language is that the partnership is now confirmed by Meghan herself rather than reported through third-party sourcing. The framing she offers, that the partnership is about credit attribution rather than commission revenue, is the public relations construction. The operational reality is that One-Off is a global fashion marketplace that allows participants to share their looks and that enables fans of the looks to purchase the items themselves. Purchase commerce generates commission. The credit attribution language is the cover. The commission stream is the substance. This is the central operational confirmation of the outspoken broadcast hosted by Dan Wootton with veteran royal reporter Robert Jobson this week. And the broader analytical context Jobson offers makes the Australian Women's Weekly interview structurally consequential beyond the one-off detail. Jobson, who has spent 15 years working with Sunrise on the Australian 7 network and who knows the Australian magazine landscape in detail, identifies the choice of Australian Women's Weekly as the publication for Meghan's flagship interview as itself a measure of how far her fashion stock has fallen. Australian Women's Weekly is a respected Australian magazine, but it operates in the register of soap opera weddings, breakfast television presenters, and mainstream Australian celebrity culture. It is not a fashion launch publication. It is not Vogue, including the Australian edition of Vogue. It is not Tatler. It is not The Telegraph magazine. The selection of Australian Women's Weekly indicates that the more prestigious fashion publications were either not interested in giving Meghan an interview platform, or that the Sussex public relations team did not want to pitch the story to publications that would conduct genuine editorial questioning of the one-off partnership and its commercial structure.
And to me, Jobbo, this looks like a PR job. Okay, it looks like this has been copy approved and the full works, but I'll take you through the whole thing.
Without doubt,
okay.
Yeah.
So they write, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, has long been a lover of fashion and a modern style icon. Really? Who's saying that?
Australian Women's Weekly accepted the interview on what reads structurally as copy approval terms. The Call Me Meg framing that runs through the Australian content is the additional structural signal Jobson identifies. The Australian vernacular abbreviation of the name Meg as the casual Aussie pronunciation of Meghan is being deployed across the tour as a populist gesture intended to communicate informal solidarity with the Australian public. The structural problem with the framing is that the Call Me Meg posture is not the posture Meghan adopts when she is moving through institutional spaces in the United States. In those spaces, the title of Duchess of Sussex is announced systematically by household staff. The same Meghan who asks Australians to call her Meg requires American venues to announce her with the full institutional title. The disjunction is the operational pattern. The institutional title is deployed where it generates social and commercial advantage. The informal name is deployed where it generates populist optics. The audience reading both registers reaches the conclusion that the registers are calibrated for instrumental effect rather than reflecting any underlying authentic identity.
I said to him the day we were flying out, the only thing better than Australian are Australians. As mentioned, the Duchess styled herself. She reiterates that it was important for her to wear Australian designers on her recent trip. I love being able to wear local designers and celebrate the craftsmanship that's happening in whatever region I'm traveling to. In 2018, during my trip to Australia, I really focused on smaller labels, female-owned brands, up-and-coming designers, and brands with purpose.
The interview itself is structured around fashion content presented as cultural commentary, and the editorial voice of the magazine is at points indistinguishable from a Sussex public relations release. The opening framing characterizes Meghan as a long-time lover of fashion and a modern style icon. The framing introduces the concept of the Meghan effect, in which pieces Meghan wore reportedly sold out soon after she was photographed in them. The Meghan effect framing has been the structural premise of Meghan's commercial fashion positioning for years. The structural problem with the framing is that it does not produce the operational outcomes the Sussex commercial pipeline requires. The As Ever brand has been in test and learn mode for over a year. The chocolate Mother's Day collection did not sell out. The candle line, manufactured in Taiwan with naming scheme errors, did not generate the volume the launch required. The wine launch deployed a 3-bottle minimum that operates as the standard market signal of weak demand. If the Meghan effect were operationally real at the level the framing suggests, the As Ever brand would not be in the financial state. Hilary Ford and Paula Frolic have been documenting. The framing is therefore the marketing claim rather than the operational reality. The Meghan effect language also requires editorial complicity, in that the magazine accepts the framing without testing it against current data. Australian Women's Weekly is reporting that the pieces Meghan wears sell out soon after, but the magazine does not present sales data, retailer commentary, or any other empirical confirmation of the claim. The framing is presented as established fact. The structural function of this kind of editorial choice is to convert the magazine into a distribution channel for Sussex-side public relations content, rather than to operate as a journalism platform. Wootton's professional response to this configuration is that the editor of Australian Women's Weekly should reflect on the editorial decision, because publishing copy-approved press releases is not editing. It is releasing other people's content under the masthead's credibility marker. The magazine is therefore lending its readership and circulation to a Sussex commercial campaign, and in exchange is receiving an exclusive interview that is not on close reading, providing the reader with information that justifies the editorial space. The specific interview content is consistent with the broader structural problem. Meghan describes the MasterChef Australia outfit, a button-down shirt and pencil skirt, as nostalgic of her Rachel Zane character from her Suits acting days, with the addition that black was a safe choice in case there were spills. The structural meaning of the Suits reference is that Meghan is positioning her current public identity by reaching back to her pre-royal acting career. The Sussex commercial brand has been built on the framing that Meghan transcended Hollywood through marriage to Harry.
Do you see where we're getting to? She's trying to justify selling her outfits, okay? To that end, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, has partnered with One Off to ensure the correct designers are credited. So it's nothing to do with her making money. Nothing to do with her making money at all. Of course not. One Off is a global fashion marketplace. It allows participants like Meghan to share their looks and properly credit the designers. It also enables fans of the looks to purchase the items themselves. I mean, Jobbo, have you ever, firstly, seen more propaganda than that? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm embarrassed for the Australian Women's Weekly publishing that.
The Australian Women's Weekly interview reaches in the opposite direction, suggesting that the Suits character is a useful reference point for the current public Meghan. The two framings cannot coexist comfortably. If Meghan is now drawing on her acting past for her public identity, the original transcendence framing is being quietly discarded. The Karen G dress reference, in which Meghan recalled wearing the same Australian designer's dresses when she announced she was pregnant with Archie all those years ago, is the next structural detail. Karen G has been a long-standing supplier to the Sussex public profile. The continued reference is consistent with the small set of designers Meghan has maintained operational relationships with against the much larger set she has not maintained. The structural picture is one of a narrowing rather than expanding fashion network, with the Australian Women's Weekly interview functioning as a demonstration that the relationships Meghan has retained are sufficient to populate a tour. The contrast with the Cambridge approach to royal tour fashion is the structural comparison Jobson develops. When Catherine, Princess of Wales, undertakes a royal tour, she wears local designers as a deliberate cultural and economic gesture, but she does not partner with commercial marketplaces to monetize the resulting visibility.
But also for her status, let's be honest, it's not even UK Vogue. It's not Tatler. This is women's. This is Australian Women's Week. It's just not where you do it. So it just shows you just how far she's come down. This is a woman that with her husband wants to monetize the royal family. This is why they're where they are, because they didn't want to play the game as it should be played. They wanted to do it their own way, and they wanted to make cheap bucks along the way. Well, that's what they're doing, and this is where they've come to. I personally think it's a real letdown for the king and for everyone else. I mean, look, Kate, when she goes to Australia, she wears clothes by local designers, but she doesn't. She's not getting people to buy them, so she gets the money in the bank. She's promoting local business.
The local designers receive the publicity benefit. Catherine receives the institutional recognition for cultural diplomacy. The transaction is institutional rather than commercial. The Sussex partnership with One Off converts the same activity into a commission-bearing commercial structure. The structural significance is that the Sussex household is monetizing the kind of activity that traditional royal tours have historically performed as service. The institutional integrity of the activity is therefore being eroded as the Sussex household demonstrates that royal-style tours can be commercial revenue events rather than diplomatic engagements. The second piece of Australian content from the same week was a separate video segment in which Meghan met two Australian influencers, both young men with Down syndrome. The segment was framed as a warm engagement with the influencers and was intended to humanize Meghan's tour activity. The structural content of the segment, which is now circulated across royal commentary channels, was an exchange in which the influencers offered Meghan a glass of Australian beer. The footage shows Meghan unable to hide her facial reaction to the taste of the beer.
This a little bit lighter.
And it's like, for someone who's meant to be an actress, Joe, it's just like, come on, just give it up. Just be yourself. You know?
She didn't like it. She wanted to spit it out. She didn't like that, you know.
Totally, and it was warm. She didn't like it.
Jobson, who is himself a non-drinker and therefore approaches the beer detail without embedded preference, observes that the structural problem is not that Meghan does not drink beer. The structural problem is that an actress should be capable of accepting a drink from a host in a way that does not register visible disgust on camera. The disgust reaction is the operational signal that Meghan's professional acting capacity does not extend to the kind of small-scale composure that ordinary public engagement requires. The segment, which was meant to humanize her, in fact produces the opposite effect, because the audience can see the calibration failing in real time. The Harry United Nations speech that has now gone viral on the Defiant L's social media feed is the parallel structural story. The clip from the speech captures Harry, stating that the people of the world are living through a pandemic that continues to ravage communities, that climate change is wreaking havoc on the planet with the most vulnerable suffering most of all, that the few are weaponizing lies and disinformation at the expense of the many. and that the horrific war in Ukraine and the rolling back of constitutional rights in the United States constitute a global assault on democracy and freedom. Adam Carolla, the American comedy and political commentary figure, posted a single-line response to the clip that has now produced substantial subsequent circulation. Rob Schneider, the actor and comedian, then posted a separate response invoking the long-standing rumour about Harry's paternity, with the framing that Harry is an embarrassment to Princess Diana and to Captain James Hewitt.
Of us feel battered, helpless, in the face of the seemingly endless stream of disasters and devastation. I understand. This has been a painful year in a painful decade. We're living through a pandemic used to ravage communities in every corner of the globe. Climate change wreaking havoc on our planet, with the most vulnerable suffering most of all. The few weaponizing lies and disinformation at the expense of the many. And from the horrific war in Ukraine to the rolling back of constitutional rights here in the United States, we are witnessing a global assault on democracy and freedom.
He's such a pussy. But then Rob Schneider went back to this old rumour, and I wanted to ask you about it, Joe. Prince Harry is an embarrassment to Princess Diana and to Captain Hewitt.
The Hewitt paternity rumour is the structural side issue Jobson then addresses with definitive professional standing. Jobson knew Diana personally. Jobson is close to Ken Wharf, the former Scotland Yard protection officer who served Diana directly and who has confirmed Diana's own statements on the question to Jobson personally. Jobson's position is that the Hewitt paternity rumour is conclusively false. Diana's own statements, recorded through Wharf, were that Charles and Diana had sexual relations approximately every 3 weeks throughout the difficult period of the marriage, in Diana's own characterization like an automaton, and that Harry is unambiguously Charles's son. The empirical confirmation comes from the timing of the relationship between Hewitt and Diana, which postdates Harry's conception. Diana and Hewitt had not met when Harry was conceived. Unless one accepts a miraculous birth framing, Hewitt cannot be the biological father. The resemblance Schneider's social media post relies on is the comparison between Harry and Hewitt as two ginger-haired men in roughly the same age range and complexion. Jobson's structural rebuttal is that the actual genetic source of Harry's red hair is the Spencer side. Sarah McCorkadale, Diana's sister, is red-haired. Diana's grandfather had the same colouring. The red hair came from Diana's family, not from Hewitt. The resemblance comparison Jobson recommends is between Harry and the young Prince Philip, particularly when both are photographed in military uniform. The bone structure, facial proportions, and overall physical profile are clearly traceable through the Mountbatten line. The empirical timeline that Jobson references can be stated more precisely. Harry was born in September 1984. Diana met James Hewitt in the summer of 1986, when Diana was already the mother of 2 children.
The rumour you're getting at is Charles, the father of Harry. He absolutely is. I know that that Diana said this to Ken, my friend, and I believe he said it. She said, "I don't know how we did do it, because Charles and Diana used to have, even through the bad days, would have sex on every 3 weeks, like an automaton, apparently." That's what she would later say. And that they did, she said, "I don't know how we did do it, but Harry is absolutely is Charles's son."
And look, there's the Prince Philip picture. We've got that actually, and you can see the comparison there.
And the most important thing is that they hadn't met when Harry was born.
The timeline produces a gap of approximately 2 years between Harry's birth and the Diana Hewitt acquaintance. The structural impossibility of Hewitt's paternity is therefore not a matter of personal speculation. It is a matter of date arithmetic. The persistence of the rumour, despite the date arithmetic, is itself a structural commentary on how cultural rumour cycles operate, when the rumour is more entertaining than the underlying empirical record. Audiences continue to repeat the rumour because it produces a satisfying narrative shape in which Diana's eventual romantic relationship with Hewitt produces a retrospective biological connection to her younger son. The narrative is satisfying. It is also incorrect. The structural significance of the Hewitt rumour for Harry personally is that the rumour has now reached the level of cultural prominence at which mainstream American comedians are referencing it as a casual aside rather than as a controversial claim. The cultural permission threshold for the joke has been crossed in the same direction as the Saturday Night Live terrorist framing for Meghan. American comedy is now treating both Sussexes as legitimate targets for direct reference jokes that previously would have carried reputational cost. The cost asymmetry has flipped on both figures. Jobson's structural framing on Harry's UN speech itself is that Harry has limited educational credentials for delivering lectures on constitutional democracy, having achieved approximately 1 A-level in art at Eton, and that the United States presidential history with figures like John Adams represents a depth of constitutional understanding that Harry does not plausibly possess. The structural problem is not the political content of the speech. The structural problem is the disjunction between the institutional framing the speech assumes, in which Harry is a globally relevant commentator on democratic institutions, and the operational record of his actual qualifications and achievements.
This is the guy that wanted out of the royal family, okay? He's the guy that, well, he wanted semi in and out, and then the Queen categorically told him, you're either in or you're out, and he chose out. He went on, famously called it the freedom flight. Okay, that's your decision. You'll always be a loved member of our family, but you're no longer a working royal. That's it, you're out. Don't trade on the name and don't try to monetize the name. That was the clear message from Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
The speech reads, as a former working royal lecturing the global community on issues he is not equipped to lecture on, and the audience reaction has now consolidated around recognizing the disjunction. Jobson's operational advice to Harry, delivered through the broadcast as a direct address, is that Harry should accept the consequences of his own choice, which was to step out of the institution rather than to remain in it. The Queen's framing in 2020 was clear. The Sussex household could remain in working royal duty or could leave it, but could not occupy the half-in, half-out configuration. Harry chose to leave. The operational implication of leaving was that he would no longer trade on the institutional name and would no longer attempt to monetize the institutional connection. Harry has subsequently violated both implications systematically across 6 years. The current trajectory in which he attempts to position himself as a globally relevant commentator while simultaneously claiming continued institutional standing through statements like the Kiev Security Forum Declaration is the unstable construction that audiences have now learned to read accurately. The personal cost of Harry's trajectory to King Charles is the closing structural element Jobson develops. Charles is undergoing cancer treatment. He paused that treatment to undertake the recent state visit to the United States. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was undergoing her own cancer treatment during the period in which Harry produced Spare with its damaging family material. The late Queen Elizabeth II was in her dying days when the full weight of the Sussex commercial pipeline was being assembled, including the autobiography recording programme that has now been confirmed in the Daily Mail.
And it is about the impact of the ongoing stress that Prince Harry is putting his father through. And this is so significant, Job, and I think it's too often overlooked because a lot of people try and say, oh, the British public will forgive Prince Harry, and one day, once he's left Meghan Markle, he'll be back in the fold. Job, I'll never forgive him because it's not just Charles. I mean, I feel hugely sympathetic to Charles given his current cancer battle, but it's Catherine when she was going through her cancer. And I will never forget what he did during Prince Philip's and the late Queen Elizabeth II's dying days. So the fact that he learned nothing from that and he is now doing the same thing to his father. After that visit, Jobbo, do you remember Harry came out and said, oh, it's all about my dad now? And actually, it's like not, because he doesn't seem to give a damn how much pressure and stress he puts Charles through.
Harry has now extended the same pattern of pressure to his father during the King's own health battle. Jobson's framing is that the institutional damage from this pattern is real, and that the cost to Charles personally, in the form of stress, distraction from treatment, and emotional weight during a period when Charles needs to focus on recovery, is substantial. Jobson's parallel from his own life is that he lost his mother during a royal tour to Australia and understands the experience of family loss alongside professional duty. His framing for Harry is that Harry's father is still alive and that Harry should recognise the privilege of that fact rather than continuing to extract commercial material from the relationship while it remains available. Camilla, Queen Consort, is now playing what Jobson characterises as the Rottweiler role in protecting the king. The framing is favourable. The institution requires figures who will absorb the political and emotional weight of family disputes so that the reigning monarch can focus on duty. Camilla has stepped into that role. The structural function of the Camilla position is consistent with the broader institutional preparation for the William and Catherine succession. Charles maintains the throne, Camilla provides the protective barrier. William prepares the next reign, Catherine establishes the public favourability foundation for that reign. The Sussex household sits outside the architecture entirely. The class economic dimension of Jobson's broader critique of Harry deserves separate framing. Jobson's structural observation is that Harry's lectures on fatherhood, on emotional well-being, and on the difficulties of public life are being delivered from the operational position of a man with $20 million in private reserves who does not need to work. The actual experience of being a father, for the majority of fathers in Britain and the United States, involves earning the income that supports the household against the constraints of time, energy, and external pressure that ordinary employment generates. Harry's public framing of fatherhood, in which he speaks of whispering to his children and of the emotional weight of the role, is delivered without the financial constraint that shapes ordinary fathers' experience of the role.
The way you speak about lecturing people about being a dad, it's easier. I can tell you one thing, Harry, if you're listening, and I suggest you start listening to people like Dan and myself, is that it's a lot easier to be a dad when you haven't got to worry about paying the bills. Because when you're a dad, you can talk to all the, you've got to go to get up at 5 a.m. to go to a building site, then come home and then it's 8 o'clock at night and your wife's moaning at you and you've got 2 little kids. It's a lot harder, mate, than if you've got 20 million in the bank and you want to whisper, things into the womb or whatever bullshit he was talking about the other day. The bottom line is most men and women, now I know we live in a world where both men and women go to work. If you haven't got to worry about the money, you don't really have to worry about, you can come out with all this absolute woke bollocks, frankly, about what it's like to be a dad. Unless you know being a dad means you've got to go out and earn money to put a roof over your wife and children's head, over their heads, and that goes for mums too, working mums, single mums. That's when you have to have a worry. This guy hasn't got a worry in the world. He lives in a mansion in Montecito. I'm out in LA, as I said. I might go give him a visit and tell him a few home truths on behalf of myself and other working men.
Oh my God, I would love it.
The king.
I
think
love
that
it.
really this man needs to stop gazing at his navel because he's got sod all else to do and actually start thinking that I've lost both my parents. I lost my dad 30 years ago nearly, and I miss him every day. I lost my mum 2 years ago, and actually I was on a royal tour I would start a royal tour to Australia when she passed away, which was heartbreaking. He wants to realise how lucky he is his father's alive and start behaving like a man instead of a wimp.
The structural disjunction between Harry's framing and the operational reality of working class and middle class fatherhood is the reason the framing fails to land with the audiences it is nominally addressed to. Audiences can read the privilege within the framing, and the framing itself becomes the irritant that previously affectionate audiences have now turned against. The Robert Jobson move to Substack is itself part of the structural story, although it sits adjacent rather than at the centre of the week's reporting. Jobson, like Wotton, has now positioned himself outside the Royal Rota system and is publishing directly to an independent audience. The financial mechanics he describes, with approximately 2,500 subscribers and 52 paid subscribers producing approximately $5,000 to date, illustrate the operational viability of the model at the level of an experienced royal reporter with established sources. The structural transition from print royal correspondence to direct independent publishing is now visibly underway across multiple correspondents, and the implication for the Sussex public relations operation is that the gatekeeping mechanisms that historically allowed the Sussex team to negotiate access on terms that limited follow-up questioning are losing their functional power. Independent reporters like Jobson, Wotton, Froelich, and the broader Royal Commentary network are now reporting directly to audiences without the editorial intermediation that the Sussex team has historically been able to influence. The closing observation is that the Australian Women's Weekly interview confirms in Meghan's own words what independent commentators have been documenting for an extended period. The Australian tour was a commercial monetization exercise dressed in the visual language of a royal tour. The one-off partnership is the operational mechanism that converts public visibility into commission revenue. The structural separation between this commercial activity and the institutional duty that traditional royal tours represent is now confirmed by the household itself. The audience that reads the interview can now compare the Sussex framing of fashion service against the Cambridge framing of cultural diplomacy, and the comparison renders the operational difference in terms the audience can read accurately. Cultural diplomacy generates institutional capital, commercial monetization generates commission revenue. The Sussex household has now confirmed which of the two activities it is conducting. The institutional and audience response will continue to calibrate accordingly.